Glaciers carved this massive tub called Loch Ness. The lake is 23 miles long and a mile wide, and lies between Fort Augustus and Inverness at the northern end of Scotland's Great Glen. The fault line cuts across the highlands, sculpting grand vistas out of rocky terrain. The play of light on water is never-ending. The sunbeams dance on waters cold and dark. Peat washed down from the surrounding hills produces a swirling murk below 50 feet. Even the lights of a modern mini-submarine cannot pierce the enveloping gloom. Since time immemorial, sprites in the waters have been said to haunt the loch. The story goes that Columba, the 6th century saint, was confronted by a monstrous beast, which in saintly style he sent packing. In the 18th century, the blasting of a military road beside the loch roused 2 enormous animals from their watery slumber. 100 years later, there were sightings of what were described as giant salamanders. Most of the locals were convinced that there was something odd, if not fearsome, swimming in the waters of Loch Ness. Many sightings have taken these 2 roads, which run along the shores of the loch. On the south, there is General Wade's military road. To the north, another road runs from Fort Augustus to Inverness. In March 1933, John Mackay and his wife were driving back from Inverness along the northern tip of the loch. Suddenly, Mrs. Mackay saw what she described as a huge black body rolling up and down in the water. As the commotion subsided, she saw 2 black humps moving across the surface of the lake. In November of the same year, the first photograph of the alleged monster was taken by Mr. Hugh Gray. It appeared on the front page of the Daily Sketch newspaper. The Sketch's rival, the Daily Mail, sent a big game hunter, Montague Wetherell, to track down the phantom beast. Stealthily, Wetherell and his cameraman prowled the beaches of Loch Ness. Almost immediately, the intrepid big game hunter discovered a set of strange footprints. He staked his reputation on their authenticity. The footprint was dispatched to London under tight security. The Mail added fuel to the public's fascination with the Loch Ness monster, now popularly referred to as Nessie. On closer examination, the mystery of Wetherell's treasured footprint was solved. It was made by a stuffed hippopotamus foot. Spring 1934. A new photograph taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson was published. The shot was dubbed the surgeon's photograph because Wilson was a gynecologist. It became the classic image of the monster. For his part, Wilson never claimed to have photographed the monster, only an object moving on the loch. Scientists were not impressed, but many people chose to believe a local man, Alex Campbell, a water bailiff who encountered Nessie on numerous occasions.
Way back many years ago, I took one of the police force with me out in my boat. There was sheep stealing going on at the time, and the police and our department worked hand in hand, you see. I took this chap out, Constable John Fraser, one of the finest men I ever saw or met, and we're rowing quietly along, crossing the loch to the far side, where there's a farm, sheep farm. About midway across the loch, rather, we heard this upsurge of water. Mind you, that was after midnight, dark, and poor John, Constable Fraser, was absolutely shattered. Oh, heavens, he said, what's that? I said, don't worry, it'll be all right. It's the creature itself. Well, we listened to it quite clearly, breathing. Like that. That was the sound of the breathing. Astonishing. And gradually, it faded gently away, and it disappeared. I mean, it's submerged. We could hear the sound. Everything flat calm, you see. Beautiful.
Shortly thereafter, Richard Singe also saw something unusual around the loch.
Object in Loch Ness, but quite a different shape.
Well, that was in August 1934, and my parents and sisters and I were staying at Fort Augustus in the hotel, and I was shaving and looking out onto the loch on a very fine morning with no wind, the loch as clear as a mirror, and there was a black hump there. At least it looked black the way the lighting was, about 3 feet across, I should say, and a foot above the water at its maximum, and about a quarter of a mile out. Well, I called the others, and as we were watching it, it suddenly started to move off in a northerly direction, I should say making about 15 miles an hour, because we paced it we got the car out, and we paced it, and we followed it for 2 miles up the side of the loch.
Singe indicated there were other witnesses.
Yes, there were some workmen by the bridge which we crossed in Fort Augustus, and we pointed it to them, and they regarded it as a matter of course. They said, oh, aye, that's the monster.
An everyday occurrence, in fact.
Well, so it seemed then.
The majority of sightings had a familiar ring to them, inspired perhaps by the surgeon's photograph. The slender neck, flat, snake-like head, humps and rough elephant-like skin were an oft-repeated description. From time to time, the denizen of Loch Ness's deep left his watery habitat and appeared on dry land. On a warm afternoon in July 1933, a couple from London, the Spicers, were driving along the old military road. Suddenly, 50 yards ahead of them, they saw a 30-foot beast emerging from the undergrowth. The animal briefly blocked the road, then went away. Even the bombastic Italian dictator Benito Mussolini laid claim to the monster as a curious sort of propaganda tool. Mussolini contended that his bombers had attacked Nessie and eliminated it. It was an unconfirmed kill. Urquhart Castle was a scene of one of the most famous sightings of the 1950s. Peter McNabb photographed what seemed to be an enormous black creature cruising on the surface in July 1955. 3 years later, BBC television mounted a monster hunt of its own in the same spot. An old steamer was anchored in the misty moors of Urquhart Bay, a favorite haunt of the Loch Ness monster. An echo sounder scanned the water below the steamer. On the deck, Raymond Baxter, the effervescent anchorman, commanded a team of frogmen with their arsenal of lights and underwater cameras. But Nessie bowed out of her network debut. She apparently preferred smaller audiences, such as this local gentleman, Lachlan Stewart.
Well, I got up as usual that morning, about 6:30 to milk the cow, and on looking from the window I saw what I first thought was a boat travelling in the direction of Doors from Urquhart Castle. On looking again a few seconds afterwards, I saw another thing appear just behind the first one. It was then that I thought it must be the monster.
Did you believe in the monster before this?
I did not. And I grabbed the camera from the sideboard, called to a friend who stayed with me, and I dashed down to the shore. But this time the monster had crossed the Loch and was heading towards fires on my side of the Loch. So I just got the 3 humps in the viewfinder and snapped.
This is in point of fact not very far from where we are now, just across the other side of the loch there.
The other side of the Loch. I think then that it saw me because it rushed up at terrific speed and submerged.
And that was the last you saw.
Meanwhile, back on the BBC trawler, anchorman Baxter related his experiences via his new radio camera. As the boat was maneuvered into position, its echo sounder had picked up a very clear signal. The contact had been recorded just as the BBC's boat was coming out of the deep water of the loch and onto the shallower shelf. The technician who was operating the machine was unable to say exactly what it might be. He was only able to describe the pattern he recorded.
Much stronger than we usually get from the type of fish we've been getting around here. And, well, I wouldn't like to say what it is, actually. It's certainly coming from...
Whatever it was, it submerged as the boat approached. Some explanations of the Loch Ness phenomenon are actually scientific ones. One theory is that the loch harbors a breeding population of plesiosaurs, a species of marine dinosaurs which survived the Ice Age in the frigid deeps of Ness. After all, the coelacanth was thought to have been extinct for 70 million years, until several were fished up in the 1930s. But scientists are uncertain that the loch was ever connected to the sea, or if it was, how a tropical marine reptile would have adapted to the conditions there. And it's not known whether the loch's stock of fish could sustain more than a score of hungry Jurassic predators. In the 1960s, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau tried its hand at solving the mystery. Boats, autogyros, and submarines were ordered into service. Tim Dinsdale was one of the full-time monster hunters. In April 1960, he made a sensation by catching on camera an image he said was Nessie. She swam on the far side of the loch, leaving a zigzag wake. Dinsdale explained that Nessie's fleeting appearance on film was only partial, the part one could see above the surface. But like beauty, perception is in the eye of the beholder. Depending on an eyewitness's point of view, the animal could resemble a variety of items, from an upturned boat to a snake-like amphibian. Different sightings have caught what may be the monster at different stages of its progress, above or just below the surface of the water. Overall, the hundreds of sightings of Nessie form a composite description that supports the plesiosaur profile. Robert Rines, president of the Boston-based American Academy of Applied Sciences, sought to get a full-body shot of the Loch Ness monster underwater. In the early 1970s, he set up shop in Urquhart Bay. 2 boats were equipped with a system of stroboscopic cameras linked with sonar rays. The sonar would detect the presence of the monster and trigger the cameras, whose flash would illuminate Nessie. This was the result. When computer-enhanced, it looked like this, a flipper-like shape. Experts estimated its length at 7 feet. 3 years later, Rines obtained 2 more glimpses of Nessie. The first was of its gargoyle-like head. The second supposedly was the creature's upper torso, neck, and head. Again, it was a matter of perspective and perception. Naturalist Peter Scott showed how easy it is to create the illusion of something moving in the loch. From Nessie to Frogman in one simple move. At the range of a mile, a small powerboat moving in and out of the bays of the loch can create the wake of a monster. In calm weather, a number of individual wave fronts move at an angle to the line of the wake. They can appear as a series of humps traveling across the surface. Skeptics point out that many of the modern eyewitness accounts of a humped creature plowing across the loch can be attributed to surface wave action. Natural phenomena may explain some of the famous alleged portraits of Nessie. The very first photo, taken by Hugh Gray, could have been a Labrador retriever rolling around in the shallows. Some say Peter McNabb's picture is merely the wake of a ship which had sailed by just before he snapped the shutter. Then there are the claims that seemed more fraudulent. Frank Searle claimed he photographed Nessie 8 times in the 1970s. His black and white glossies were sharp and clear and bore more than a passing resemblance to fabricated photos of dinosaurs in watery environments. The surgeon snapshot is another story. Robert Kenneth Wilson always maintained that he did not believe in Nessie. In 1994, his famous photograph was revealed to be a fake. One of Wilson's accomplices, Christopher Sperling, told the press that Wilson's Nessie had been fashioned from plastic, wood, and mounted on a toy clockwork submarine. Apparently, Wilson was surprised by a water bailiff after taking the photograph. The fake evidence went overboard and now lies at the bottom of the loch. Movies of the monster have raised more questions than they answered. Tim Dinsdale's film was analyzed by a Royal Air Force photo reconnaissance team who declared it to be an animate object. Some others think it's only a small powerboat. Operation Deep Scan was launched in 1987. The exercise had 2 objectives: to gather information about Loch Ness's unique ecology and to flush out its primeval inhabitant. Deep Scan's chorus line of cabin cruisers covered about 80% of the steep-sided loch. The operations director, Adrian Shine, is a Loch Ness expert.
We don't expect a Jurassic reptile to come out of this loch. A large fish, perhaps. But that would be interesting enough for me.
Deep Scan sonars failed to provide conclusive evidence of Nessie's existence. She remained as elusive as ever. But one element of Deep Scan cast serious doubt on the photographs taken in Urquhart Bay by Robert Rines in 1975. An underwater camera was lowered into the same spot. The water was not as deep as Rhines had claimed, and there was something else down there among the slithering eels. This is Rhines' photograph of the so-called gargoyle head of the monster. And here in the same spot is a rotting tree stump to which the gargoyle head bears an uncanny resemblance. But the sightings continue to this day. In 1994, a vacationing couple videotaped a strange disturbance on the surface of the loch.
What the hell is it? Got that thing on Zoom?
As close as I can get. John?
Nah.
Yes. Look at it. Look at how fast that water's going.
Sunlight and shadow cast their spell on the loch as powerfully as ever. In so magical a place, it is all too easy to imagine a creature swimming just below the surface. And yet Loch Ness still keeps a tight hold on its secrets, and hunters still pursue it. Extensive searches and the most modern sonar equipment have been unable to produce conclusive evidence of a monster in Loch Ness. Submarines and divers have failed to make what would be one of the greatest scientific finds of the century. The plesiosaur theory raises more questions than it answers. But might Nessie be another creature entirely? A creature of our imaginations, whose mystique will endure throughout time.